Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, September 20th, 2018. And, there's more lottery news. September 20, 2018. Boy, oh boy, I would say that's probably the weakest connection to lottery number pick I've ever happened to notice. But hey, all of them are weak because it doesn't work that way with the lottery and you're wasting your money if you're buying tickets based on this. But you might think it's fun. Yesterday, Yom Kippur, we missed it. I did. I was atoning for, I atoned for everybody. I atoned for a lot of people who wouldn't fess up to their sins, all those sorts of things. An incomplete job as usual. That's sort of the nature of the business. But hey, I apologize to all of you against whom I sinned by not providing a live show yesterday. How about that? And a number of other things too, including, not covering the the right stories or covering them the right way. Does that count as a sin? There are more serious ones out there, of course. That brings us to the Brett Kavanaugh story. Not to mention the frog that has been living rent-free in my throat, which is also a sin. I can't figure out where this one showed up from. I was fine like 2 seconds ago. The radio does this to me, I guess. All right. Welcome back to Bill, all the way from Portland, Maine, tweeting his morning tweet. We've missed you for a while, and I understand you were in the hospital. And you told everybody, and so I don't think that's a HIPAA violation for me to say so at this point. Glad you're back. Hope everything's okay. Another sin for which I could atone, and not saying on Twitter, hey, congratulations on getting out of the hospital. It's one of those things that I tend not to actually get around to doing. I find that weird, too. I always never really sure how to express personal sentiment via Twitter. But, people do these things. Anyway, Daily Coast Radio is live now, he tells us. Kagro X, that's me. Maybe a little late this morning, as the time needed for his Yom Kippur atonement-related activities is running way over this year, and it really could have. This was the first time I ever remember Yom Kippur going into double overtime, to be honest. But I tried to be better in the last year. Maybe next time we can wrap it up without penalty shootouts, and I think that would really be the best way you could handle it. Because quite honestly, God goes 5 for 5 on these things, and it's ridiculous for me to have to go up against him. Anyway, there's another sin right there. Her? I don't know. Right, okay. Enough with the theological talk. It is time for some Kagro X in the morning. I might as well read the Mighty OCD's morning tweets too, right? I like this one. You've included the Krispy Kreme hot sign in there as well. I like the graphics. Brett Kavanaugh, still around and still a matter of some contention. I read this morning, let's see. Oh, look at this. Here's a tweet from somebody I do not know, but happened to end up in my timeline. Let's see. I can't think of any Facebook comments I want to read less than the ones on this post. It is a retweet of a C-SPAN tweet. Men only, they're asking. I don't know why. But, C-SPAN divides things up that way. Call in on this line if you're a Republican. This line if you're a Democrat. This line if you're embarrassed to be a Republican. That's what the independent line is. Men only, they're asking. Should Judge Brett Kavanaugh be confirmed? To stick with the theological theme, I don't think he ever should have even been baptized, but that's not really my business. Whether or not he's confirmed, I guess you kind of should, celebrate your faith in your own way. But look, he wasn't guilty at the time of the baptism, I'm sure. Maybe they should have suspended communion for him at some point after his high school career. But it's yet to be proven, and this is not an ecclesiastical court. I'm telling you right now. I'm only piling up sins for next year's Yom Kippur. I want to keep busy. Otherwise it would be an awfully boring service. It takes a very long time. So we'll throw all of those things out there for people to consider for the day. Greg Dworkin, I am sure, has a pile of stories, unless he's also stuck atoning still, but I think he probably gets his done in a couple minutes. I'm the one with the big problem here. Let's see. Where we left off, we were, I think, on Tuesday just finding out that Dr. Ford might not want to testify at the hastily arranged Monday hearing at which they scheduled both he and her to testify. And I guess they were the only witnesses, which is kind of strange because we also know the name of another actual witness, although he claims he didn't witness the thing, but it might be interesting to hear from him. And it's causing all sorts of problems, of course. But I do note for the record that apparently Chuck Grassley, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, in arranging this thing, basically said, all right, we're going to have a hearing, called Kavanaugh, said, can you do Monday? He said, yeah, sure, because he's hauling himself all the way from Bethesda, Maryland. Very tough. Does he live in Bethesda still? He's from the area anyway. And then they just said, all right, well, Monday it is. And then somebody maybe said to him, do you think you ought to call and see if the other witness can make it? Oh, 'cause they didn't contact her or didn't hear back from her or her representation anyway. And she'd be coming from Palo Alto, right? So it's a bit more of a stretch for her, although, you can make it across the country in less than a week or two these days, wagon trains being what they are. And it's possible, but then there's another question. Do you want to? Do you care what a bunch of, well, let's say dusty old farts in Washington, D.C. Do you care to answer their questions, to answer their partisan questions? The initial explanation of her demands, her conditions for testifying seemed to center on whether or not she can get an impartial investigation of some basic ground level facts about things before they begin. And it's a good point that why would you want to think you could settle this thing by, she's going to come to Washington, Republicans will scream at her. He's going to come to Washington, Democrats will scream at him. And I don't know what you think you're going to find out from that, although airing the story is a good thing. But remember, she doesn't have to air it there. I suppose if they subpoena her, she has the choice of airing her views there, I guess, still. But then there'd be some consequences possible if she didn't. But she could air those, tell her story anywhere. She could have a press conference on the Capitol steps if she wants to demonstrate the fact that there's no physical barrier to my coming to Washington. I just don't like those guys and the way they handle things or whatever. Or she could do it in Palo Alto. She could tell her story. There's no opportunity for cross-examination, but so what? We're pretty sure the cross-examination would be relatively stupid at this point, given the questions that have been asked in public about her and about her life. Other developments along the way as well. There's been more signatories from the Holton Arms School to that letter that initially garnered 200 or so signatures, although it may be a second letter, but this one gathered far more signatures. And another letter, as I understand it, a sort of an open letter being published somewhere, I'm not really sure. I have the Daily Kos write-up of it here, or a Daily Kos write-up of it from the diaries that I grabbed yesterday. It may be on the front page by this point. Letter from Kavanaugh Ford classmate claims this incident did happen. And we're talking about, we've called your name before, Ursula. Ursula Faw, is it? F-A-W, and I never, did check back. Well, how do we say this? And no one really cares anyway. I think you all know who I'm talking about. Constitutional law professor Lawrence Tribe calls this letter explosive, although you didn't need to be a constitutional law professor to do so. It is a letter from Christina King, and I guess it looks like maybe a Facebook post of some kind or something. I'm not sure of the provenance of this thing, but I did see it passed around. The long story short of it, essentially, is she also attended Holton Arms, and I guess around the same time, and she was familiar with both Christine Blasey at the time and Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. And like the original letter said, look, this is the way things were back in the day for kids at these prep schools. This is a very familiar story, as the first letter of the 200 said. But she adds in her own letter, look, I remember this. This did happen. As she puts it, Christine Blasey, now Christine Blasey Ford, was a year or so behind me. I remember her. This incident did happen. Many of us heard about it in school, and Christine's recollection should be more than enough for us to truly, deeply know that the accusation is true. Well, that's a matter for cross-examination, I guess, if you want to handle things that way. But this is the sort of thing I expected to surface very quickly, and I guess it really has surfaced pretty quickly. I would not be surprised at all if that was the talk of the school for some time. And so, what do you know? It took all of about 2 days to find some people that say, oh, yeah, I remember when people were talking about that. I might not have been sure about it then, but I'm sure I remember it now, and that's worth something. We'll see whether the hearing develops anything like this. We'll see whether an investigation develops anything like this. Lots of process talk about whether or not the FBI can, should, will, won't investigate something like this. Let's bring in Greg Dworkin. Well, he's here. Let's talk to Greg Dworkin. How about that? And make his whole phone call worth it. Good morning, Greg. Okay. Now, this doesn't seem to be working out.
Oh, it's working out.
Okay. Terrific. You had to hit the a tone button.
I had to hit the unmute button because I had muted it since Abby was being the local doorbell. I see. And I thought I would spare our listeners that. I forgot to turn it back on. Did you cover the David K. Johnson post?
No, I didn't. Not yet. What is that?
Had a, oh, my God, Facebook post by classmate of Kavanaugh and buddy Mark Judge on awful morals that Senate GOP should worry about. And here it is. It's by a fellow named Eric Royak, R-U-Y-A-K. I'll just read it. It's short.
Okay.
Funny bit of full circle nonsense. For those of you who don't know, I went to Georgetown Prep, where both Kavanaugh and Gorsuch went as well. When I came forward with allegations regarding Gary Orr, a former priest, sexually assaulting me, Mark Judge, Kavanaugh's friend in this, whose despicable story of sexual assault, reached out to alums saying that Gary Orr was a great priest and I had obviously been corrupted by liberalism into a homosexual and therefore was most definitely lying.
Oh, well, as homosexuals do. Yes.
Years later, when Orr admitted to raping a whole cadre of children, he said that Orr was raping kids because of the unchecked liberalism at Prep, and that regardless of whether or not I was telling the truth, I was a homosexual, had it coming.
Wow.
Google Mark Judge Gary Orr, and you will see what a effing loon this guy is, and with what malice he writes in his right-wing bullshit. So for me, to hear that this SOB is involved in the allegations of Kavanaugh attempting to rape a girl in high school comes as no surprise. It's always the loudest, most arrogant voice, yada, yada, other bad things to say about Judge. And then he says, by the way, the story that this woman is telling is one that I know was repeated dozens of times in my 4 years at Prep.
Wow.
And so that's the line I think is most relevant here. Is that proof? No, it's hearsay. But is it worth investigating? Well, that's the point. Other people who were there may, in fact, come forward with various and sundry things. The one that you just cited, who was the woman friend, told, I think, Nina Totenberg on NPR that she doesn't really remember one way or the other, that she doesn't have any direct knowledge. So she reaffirmed that. So that doesn't look as damning as it appeared at first, and yet there's lots of other people there, and they could certainly speak to the whole culture of what was going on there. Point being that Brett Kavanaugh is no angel who's somehow, led this life that is impeccable, and, how can anybody say a bad thing about this wonderful judge who we've paid millions of dollars to have women say nice things about on TV? There's probably more to this story. And, there's obviously two aspects here. You have a credible case being made, not proven, but credible allegation, I guess is the proper term. I'm not a lawyer, being made by a professional woman who otherwise has a very good reputation. And we don't really know what happened. And there is a rush to judgment and get this done because power politics says the best thing to do is to set a date, make her show up, and if she doesn't, too bad, we tried by. And so that's what's going to wind up happening. Now, whether or not she does show up on Monday is an open question. She doesn't want to. She'd like other things to happen first. But as this argument has devolved, and I say that because it's not anymore about the merits of what's going on, unfortunately. Anita Hill was right. You should take your time and do it slow, but do it right if that's what you want to do. It's all become power politics. And the power politics is, I get the arguments, I get the concerns, I get all of that. We won, we have the votes, we're doing it Monday.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, in politics, and as we've talked about on the show so often, in Congress, and this is a congressional thing right now, That's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
You have the
That's the
votes
way they
and
do
you
it.
have the gavel. You're going to do it your way. And you can make all the processed arguments you want about it. In the end, that's what it comes down to. So everything else is a smokescreen. Yelling at Dianne Feinstein for how this got out there is a smokescreen. And the Republicans will do that because they would prefer that to be the discussion rather than a bunch of octogenarian, old, GOP white men questioning these sorts of accounts in public, which they'd rather not do.
Yeah, well, I can understand. Well, like I said, she's not limited to that as an option for telling her story. She can tell it wherever she wants, however she's comfortable. And
as we talked about the
people
other
will
day,
complain.
this committee vote is not the final vote anyway. So
That's
there's
true,
time after the committee, but before the final vote in the Senate for all sorts of stuff, including, as you point out, interviews and whatever else she wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Pershing had some very nice comments here about process. He says that, there's no 100% clear way Feinstein should have handled the letter given Ford's confidentiality request.
Yes.
Nor is there a 100% clear way that the committee should handle a 36-year-old allegation now. That said, there seems to be a contradiction in the GOP's process complaints. What would the committee have done if it had gotten the letter a month earlier? A more thorough investigation either by the FBI or panel staff?
No.
If the answer is yes, why can't these things happen now?
Then yes.
And obviously, if the answer is no, then
No.
the whole process question is like, why are you even asking?
Right.
So remember, there's no
Yes.
actual hard deadline here for a vote. The nomination is not about to expire. The seat doesn't have to be filled by October 1st.
True.
Even if that's the GOP's preference.
Yes.
The Senate can stay in session as long as McConnell wants, because he's got the gavel and he can decide, right?
True, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, subject to some things, but generally speaking, yes. There's no reason why the timeline's artificial. That's it.
So Pershing goes on to say, and if the answer is that the committee would have just done the exactly same thing a month ago, which is, of course, what we all believe, just hear testimony from Kavanaugh and Ford, that's it. Why does it matter when the letter came out? What's the difference?
I guess that's true. But yeah, so by the way, the additional letter that you just read argues again for questioning for Mark Judge.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and as I just started with my segment, there's a lot of questions about Mark Judge. And there's questions about other people who may or may not have been there. So there's plenty of stuff to investigate. It's not like all of this is completely and totally unknowable.
Right.
The experts who look at cases like this in a criminal setting, and I'm not a lawyer, and although I've had my share of having to deal with stuff like this in my professional capacity, I'm not an expert and don't claim to be. But the fact is that a lot of times you just simply set up the situation, you get to the facts as best as you can establish them, and then you look at the credibility of the people involved on the one side and on the other side. It in and of itself, in coming to a conclusion, is way, way more than just he said, she said.
Yes.
So that's the way it's done. It's done all the time. There are experts who do this. The Senate happens to be not those experts.
No, quite the opposite. So, okay, I would avoid them if I could.
Well, you can. I mean, there are ways to do that. Ron Klain suggested, why doesn't Ford's counsel question Kavanaugh and Kavanaugh's counsel question Ford? In other words, a designated person to go up there and, joust in my as my champion, rather than me do it, and keep the senators out of it and keep the grandstanding out of it, and just do that. That's how it would have been better. And he says that from experience of being at the Anita Hill hearings.
Well, that is one suggestion. And
Collins made a similar suggestion.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Collins is all into process. So through a process, you're going to lose.
I'm not sure I love that one, but yeah, it's not my favorite necessarily, but I don't think there's any really great options. But again, I will reserve the right for her to just say, hey, there's no court case here. I'm not going to testify for anybody or anything. I'm going to do it my own way. I'm going to give a press conference. If you have questions, ask them. If I answer them, great. If I don't, complain. Bye.
So, yeah, I mean, and there's no reason for her to be compelled, although I suppose Congress can do that too, right?
Yeah,
as well as Mark Judge.
Yes, that's true too, and it'll make it difficult if they end up subpoenaing her and not subpoenaing Judge. But again, they can do that, and they would have the votes to do that. And I mean, it would make for an interesting story if she were willing to go through it, to ignore the subpoena and say, okay, so this is how they deal with sexual harassment and sexual assault complaints in the Republican Congress. They arrest
which is, by the way,
complainant.
how the big picture is looking right now.
Yes.
Which is why, it's not going to go well for them in the election.
Yeah, well,
let's just put it that way.
It ought not to.
It ought not to, but this is not helping them. If they ever thought that somehow putting Kavanaugh on the bench was going to help them in November.
In November. Yeah. All right. No.
That was not a good calculation.
No, not really. Although they don't. The idea of putting Kavanaugh on the bench was partly about not having to care very much about what elections say from now on.
I suppose. Here's the other side of it, and this. I don't know if I sent you this one or it's just in the pundit roundup that I had, but it was a look at the White House in terms of how they were approaching it.
Oh, yes.
And I think this is from the Daily Beast, and it's in there. It's like toward the end.
I'll go get it.
Team Trump is the title. If we ditch Kavanaugh, we're signing our own death warrant.
Awesome.
That's a quote.
Okay. Sign away. Here's a pen.
It's Judge Kavanaugh or bust. A piece by Lachlan Markey, Aswin Subsang, and Sam Stein.
Okay.
And basically, they view the next few days, they said, as a virtual X-ray on the backbone of their party and a litmus test for the future of Trump's presidency. A withdrawal would be disastrous for Trump, one pro-Trump political operative who worked on the president's 2016 campaign said. You take away the whole "we're sick of winning" message, it's a huge marquee top-line loss.
Okay.
Rarely have Supreme Court fights been defined in such crassly political terms. That's our mistake. Supreme Court fights are always political, as Armando, I think, would be the first to tell us.
Yes.
But this is the landscape following the public emergence Sunday of a woman who accused Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her more than 30 years ago. The allegation has roiled the confirmation proceedings with both Professor Christine Blasey Ford and Kavanaugh, now set to appear before the Senate Judiciary Committee this coming Monday, except we don't really know who's coming or whether anybody's coming.
Right. Other than that.
Right. So Matt Schlapp said this will be huge consequences for any Republican who backs away and who gives the Democrats any lane to scuttle this nomination. We will score the vote on Judge Kavanaugh, and we will hold them accountable. And you can tell that that's happening because good old Dean Heller, who's in a tight race himself in Nevada, said, we'll get past this little hiccup. So he's characterizing a credible charge of sexual assault as the little hiccup that could.
I see. Maybe she just is walking out because she thinks the hearings are a bad joke.
Maybe.
That's the
in a normal situation, you'd think, look, Kavanaugh's kind of tainted at this point.
A little bit.
And we have a whole bunch of other people that could get this nomination much easier, as Mitch McConnell told us way back when this first started. So why don't we just pull them and put other people here? But this isn't a normal White House, and it's not normal situations.
No.
This is we have to win. We can't afford to lose. And even if we put somebody who's basically completely and totally destroyed by the time he gets up there, we'll do that to own the libs. And that's really what's more important.
Right. It doesn't matter that he, is tainted as a justice and ruins the integrity of the Supreme Court. We say it was ruined anyway.
We already did that with Clarence Thomas. What's the big deal?
Basically. So why not? So, and see, they already have a seat on the court. I don't understand.
So they're not even breaking norms there.
Right. Well,
it's not 1991. It is the Me Too movement, and I think that they're completely miscalculating. And I'm not alone in that. I'm reading a lot of, comments from various and sundry Republican strategists.
Well,
this is like really a bad idea, guys. What are you doing? This is going to be terrible.
First election after the Clarence Thomas confirmation became the year of the woman and an explosion in the number of women running, and we've already shattered all the records for the number of women running this year. I guess it's going to be like an all-woman Congress next time.
Well, at this rate, it certainly
I guess so.
And I was mistaken the other day. I thought that Dianne Feinstein was on the committee at the time of the Anita Hill hearings. But actually what happened is because of that hearing in 1991, she was elected in 1992. So she was a direct result of those hearings.
Yep. Okay. So,
but
she was
Grassley
alive.
And Hatch and Leahy were there.
Yes.
And it looks like they're repeating their roles.
Was certainly, obviously politically connected at the time. So she was certainly aware of it. And it definitely influenced her campaign.
Absolutely. Anyway, so that's the background. How it all plays out, still to be seen. Republicans are feeling fairly confident that they have the votes, but they at least profess confidence.
Yes.
The problem is they don't know if there are other shoes to drop, and they certainly don't know the wild card, which is, given all of this and all of the posturing, is Dr. Ford going to testify on Monday? They don't even know that yet.
Nope, still to come. So, all right. We are up against our first break. We'll have to play our music in a few seconds, but it gives us about a minute to exit here.
Yeah, well, that's about my summary for today. So there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of people yelling at each other, and nobody really knows what's going to happen next.
Yeah, that's largely it. There's more process stories to read, to play out, about minutia, about things that run parallel to the story, things that are deeply integrated as part of this story. We'll have to get to all of that in the next couple segments. All right, well, a good start. Thank you, Greg. You have to run early today?
Yeah, but I got a couple other things that are non-Kavanaugh related to just go over with you.
Oh, excellent. All right, well, if you can wait 2 minutes, then we'll...
I can do that.
All right, excellent. I'm glad everyone else
I waited
too.
this long.
Right, okay, Abby, just hold on a second. Hold it in. Girl, you'll be fine. All right, we'll be right back after these, messages. I guess they're messages. They're messages from me. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are still with Greg Dworkin, just wrapping up the. Are we on non-Kavanaugh news or still with more Kavanaugh? I forget.
No, we're pretty much done with the Kavanaugh stuff. I will say Haggai Elitzer tweets something which is just worth being the endpoint to this, and he's talking about some of the classmates who have been talking on Facebook about. What happened at that time, supportive or otherwise. And he notes, there's still a lot of very naive people out there about how the internet works these days. You're not just talking to your friends. So if you say something like, well, I was there and I sort of remember everybody talking about it, and then you get inundated with like 50 reporters wanting you on cable news in 3 hours.
Yes.
And then you go and you delete your post because you didn't want this kind of attention.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're a liar.
Yeah. Well, interesting. That's kind of funny. Where is do you have that one? Is that in your
no, it's just I have that one too. I'll send it to you, but it's just he's right.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the last point I'll make in terms of Dr. Ford testifying is that not everybody is media trained and ready for this circus.
That's true too.
And so the idea that, if you don't testify, that just proves X, Y, or Z. No. If you won't get interviewed about that comment you made on Facebook, just proves X, Y. No. Or just like normal people that don't want this kind of attention.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that if they're going to say stuff like that in public, they're going to get hounded, doxxed, death threats. I mean, the whole gamut of stuff happens.
Yes.
And people still don't realize that.
They don't. And I wouldn't be surprised if we find out that there are other people who don't realize it, who are discussing it from the other side and saying, I remember the whole thing and it was great. And it's awesome and high fives. And, oh, whoops, I got found out. Okay.
But the other side of that coin is that there are a lot of people who do realize it and really don't want to talk about it.
Right.
Just as Dr. Ford didn't want to come forward in the first place. Mm-hmm. For really good reasons.
Well, I think so.
Anyway, so that's it for that.
Okay. All right, let's get
Meanwhile, we have this enormous hurricane, a very wet one.
One of the wettest we've seen from the standpoint of water.
Right. So Trump goes down to North Carolina to throw out paper towels because that's what you do when things are really wet.
Yes.
And he steps onto the property in New Bern, that's 2 words, North Carolina, which got inundated and flooded. Mm-hmm. As this story writes, President Trump clearly has an eye for luxury, even in the most unexpected circumstances. Walking along River Drive in New Bern, North Carolina, a low-lying neighborhood that was pummeled by a 1-2 punch of Hurricane Florence and post-storm flooding, Trump greeted residents and surveyed the devastation, according to a Wednesday pool report. Then he saw the yacht. It was beached in the resident's backyard. Is that your boat, he said, or did it become your boat? No, it wasn't his boat, the homeowner replied, according to the pool report, which didn't identify residents by name. Well, at least you got a nice boat out of the deal, he said.
Yes. At least
now,
you got a
whether
nice
Trump was joking or simply pointing out a bit of silver lining, the interaction prompted some to question the president's empathy for the many Carolinians whose homes and possessions were destroyed in Florence. That house was not in good shape, by the way. Oh. The latest in a string of his responses to natural disasters to be criticized. And in fact, there was a local reporter who experienced this for the first time because they went to the Trump briefing, and I do have that in the list of things that I gave you way at the top, a fellow named Brett Coleman. He said Trump's storm briefing in North Carolina was surreal. First, nobody briefed them. Politicians mostly just thanked him. Second, he praised local officials for their talent. Third, he said we have the strongest economy ever. And fourth, he asked about Lake Norman, where his golf course is. Mackie Haberman tweeted him and said, I guess local reporters are coming to grips with Trump.
Yes. Welcome to it.
Welcome to it.
They, I guess, not very familiar with it or not receptive to the message that he's a painfully idiotic dotard. Because I guess the guy with the boat in his backyard later told him, oh, I love you. I named my dog after you, which I think is, I thought that was supposed to be a compliment. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But he was impressed with that, I guess, Trump was. So finders keepers on the boat, though. Yes, that's actual
I suppose that's how it works. So meanwhile, just to give you an idea of how the whole background is going here to all of this, to the Kavanaugh discussions, to Trump's handling of the hurricanes, not just this one, but Maria and everything else, how things are going in general. Kansas. You know Kansas.
I've heard of it.
So Kansas has a gubernatorial race going on. Laura Kelly, Democrat.
Yes, they don't believe gubernatorial is a real word there.
But the Republican is a fellow named Chris Kobach.
Heard of him.
Kobach. I never know how to pronounce his name.
No, yeah.
I hope I don't have to learn. So
just his prisoner number will be fine.
He's running, and it turns out that there's a person from Kansas who's not real happy with that. Her name is Nancy Kassebaum.
I've heard of her.
You may have remembered her. She was a senator. She represented Kansas for 3 terms in the U.S. Senate.
Yes.
Okay. But more than that, there's more to her pedigree than that. She happens to be the daughter of Alf Landon,
the
governor of Kansas from 1933 to 1937, and the 1936 Republican nominee for president.
Excellent.
She's the widow of a fellow senator and diplomat by the name of Howard Baker.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God. I mean, yes.
Right?
Right.
So I'm just trying to make the argument and the point and the predicate here that she's a Republican.
Pretty much. Yes.
Right? Accepted?
So stipulated, yes.
All right, so stipulated. So she's endorsing Democratic State Senator Laura Kelly.
Right, but she's a Democrat, yes. Oh, you said Republican.
Nancy
That's
Kassebaum, the Republican who represents Republicanism.
Okay,
you know,
right.
Is saying, I can't do Kobach. I can't. She says, I'm a Republican, but that doesn't mean you walk lockstep always with the party, she said, which is true.
That mean? I never heard that.
Yeah, you never did?
It's in the Constitution. All right, well. That's
so Kobach's
great.
campaign, what do? They cast doubt on Kassebaum's Republican credentials.
Of course, yes. Why would anyone think she was a Republican?
Right. Democrats tried out these same tired has-beens clinging to the past, pretending to be Republicans when they so clearly left the party a long time ago.
Yes. Or
Republican?
you left
Yeah, right, she said. Right. About Kassebaum. About Nancy Kassebaum.
Well, we've talked about how they would have excommunicated Ronald Reagan a long time ago.
And that's exactly what's going on here.
Yep.
So let's move to Michigan.
You mean Nancy Kassebaum should move to Michigan?
Oh, no. Let's us move our focus to Michigan.
Oh, yes.
All right. Jonathan Oosting, who is Michigan politics reporter for the Detroit News, notes that former U.S. Representative Joe Schwartz, I believe I pronounced that right, a former Snyder, Governor Snyder, and Governor Engler, Administration Health Director Jim Haveman, former Engler Transition Director Richard McClellan, I think I pronounced McClellan right, I think I pronounced Richard right,
I think so,
and Milliken Administrator Treasurer Vivian Carpenter are co-chairing a new, quote, Republicans and Independents for Whitmer group in the Michigan governor race, refusing to endorse the Republican Schuett, who I think that the current governor Snyder also refused to endorse.
Wow. It's almost as if, I don't know.
It's almost as if he's Ted Cruz, as somebody put on Twitter.
I'm not going to go that far.
That disliked in your own party.
Wow. It doesn't even hoard soup.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
Right. So just in the Midwest alone, I mean, we also have a recent MU law poll that came out since the last time I did the show. And the MU law poll by Charles Franklin is a wonderful poll, one of the better state polls, and has Scott Walker trailing by 5. And a point I'm trying to make is that in the Midwest, Trump and the Republicans are in pretty deep trouble here.
Well, have you been to the diners?
Well, those are in West Virginia.
Oh, the bars then.
Or Pennsylvania.
Then what else is left? The farm co-op. I don't know.
Well, you can find stuff.
Bowling
but
alleys.
I'm just saying these tariffs, like they're not playing so well in the Midwest.
Oh. Yeah. Funny what they pay attention to. Okay.
So if you're going to hurt the farmers are going to hurt you. And so all of that, again, is more background for what's happening in the coming November election. And that is all background for the whole jostling that's going on with Kavanaugh right now. Okay. It's all part and parcel of the same thing.
No wonder they don't want to have elections. Or they'd rather not.
I'm not sure they're going to be happy about this election, but there it is.
All right.
Anyway, that's my summary for this morning. Lots of jostling, lots of unclear about what's going on. And the last thing I'll say about Kavanaugh is that all of the stuff about Dr. Ford and the accusation is a pretty big deal. But the Washington Post has a pretty good story here. I'm noticing the analysis of Brett Kavanaugh's unlikely story about Democrat stolen documents. In other words, there's plenty of evidence that he's an unreliable candidate anyway out this. But it's probably all going to be ignored and all going to be on this. And the downside's going to be if he gets nominated anyway, then, of course, we have somebody who's just, like, bad.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
A bad person, not just, like, bad. I don't like his politics.
Yeah, well, and it'll be interesting. I mean, once it's done, I mean, there's always a remedy out there, but, I mean, the political appetite for fighting the battle is over largely when the confirmation is done, unless he gets himself arrested somewhere.
Yeah, well, like Maryland, because there's no statute of limitations. Well, all right. Well, with that, I will leave you. But thanks so much for indulging me this morning. It's good to be back. Take care. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning. He'll go on. He'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back Monday. Yes. And we'll do it again.
Right, unless there's some hidden holiday we don't know about on Monday.
Well, there is a hidden holiday, you know. I saw this on the internet, so I know.
All right.
Today's the day that Gerald Ford got stuck in an elevator in some library somewhere.
Wow.
And the elevator has a plaque. On this date, Gerald Ford was briefly detained in this elevator.
Wow.
And so in that particular library, it's a holiday.
Okay. Well,
these are the kinds of things like you wouldn't know except for the internet.
Yeah, I guess not. And it's too bad it didn't happen on Talk Like a Pirate Day. That would have been great.
Right.
All
righty. Well, take care, and I'll talk to you.
Okay, very good. Thanks a lot, and we'll continue on here. Boy, what an interesting. Well, that is an interesting holiday. There's a reason to note every day. All right, let's see. A few more things we could note off the top of our heads. That is my head, and then I'll put it on your head because you're listening. I want to at least take note of this. I guess the Daily Mail, which we totally hate and never want to validate by citing them. And we say this every time we do cite them. Has this story? Is this come from? Where's the original source here? That can't be the Daily Mail. Is it this? Is it CNN? They seem to be citing this here. Yeah. So I'm following the non-paper trail on this. Oh, let's see. Oh, of course, that wouldn't. Oh, that's interesting. I'm trying to get rid of. That's the Daily Mail for you. I'm trying to get rid of a pop-up ad that is playing video, and so I click the X button to get rid of it. But apparently the X button doesn't close it at all. And I've tried this like 5 times. It's not a joke. I was wondering when they would get around to doing this on the internet. The X button doesn't close it. The X button actually clicks through and sends you to a page to buy the product. And I was wondering about that. I mean, that's just, I guess, internet, what would you call it? What coding protocol is giving people the opportunity to close the ad and at the X. By the way, I mean, it says close and X. So there's no doubt about what you're meant to think that button does. But I wondered when they would get around to programming ads that simply don't close, or they would just say, we'll program it so that when people click the close, it actually clicks through to the ad instead. And A, we'll get paid more, and B, we'll advertise apparently more effectively, even if it makes people mad. So anyway, I can't get rid of this thing, but I also can't get through to CNN through their link. There we go. Anyway, just a good question for internet programming ethics there. Is it against some rule or canon somewhere to simply make the X button, the close button, into it's a click through and we're going to get paid button? Probably. Anyway, here's the original, I guess, source of the story. There is another identified witness / purported attendee at the party, which Brett Kavanaugh totally didn't go to, even though he doesn't know which one it is. In a letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee, another former classmate of Brett Kavanaugh's denies attending a party like the one described in the allegation made by Christine Blasey Ford, who was accused the Supreme Court nominee of sexually assaulting her 3 decades ago when they were teenagers. Patrick J., I don't know whether he says Smith or Smythe, we'll see. He's S-M-Y-T-H. Attended Georgetown Prep. You know all about it. Both men, he and Kavanaugh, that is, graduated in 1983. He signed a letter this summer, really, before the allegations against Kavanaugh were made public, testifying that Kavanaugh is singularly qualified to be an associate justice in the U.S. Supreme Court, along with a dozen other of the school's alumni. Oh, that was just a general, we graduated with him and he's awesome, which is questionable at best, but probably a relatively common practice, I think. I thought they were going to say he signed a letter saying, I wasn't at that party either, even before it became public. Eric Bruce, who was representing Smith and or Smythe, authored a letter to the Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley of Iowa and Dianne Feinstein of California, top Democrat on the committee, in case you didn't know. CNN has obtained a copy of the letter, which includes a quote from him denying seeing any improper conduct from Kavanaugh. Of course, they had closed the door and they turned up the radio so no one could have seen or heard the improper conduct. But hey, never mind all that. I understand that that I have been identified by Dr. Christine Blasey Ford as the person she remembers as PJ, who supposedly was present at the party she described in her statements to the Washington Post. Smith Smythe says in his statement to the Senate Judiciary Committee, I am issuing this statement today to make it clear That's not really going to happen, but okay. To make it clear to all involved that I have no knowledge of the party in question, nor do I have any knowledge of the allegations of improper conduct she has leveled against Brett Kavanaugh. Personally speaking, I have known Brett Kavanaugh since high school, and I know him to be a person of great integrity, a great friend, and I have never witnessed any improper conduct by Brett Kavanaugh towards women. To safeguard my own privacy and anonymity, I respectfully request that the committee accept this statement in response to any inquiry the committee may have, i.e. don't subpoena me, just as Mark Judge says the same thing. So there we have it. It's out there. There's at least one other person named, and no, I was never there. But hey, just maybe sort of accidentally remembered that guy was there. Okay. I'm sure it's a huge mistake. Is there any more about that story? I don't think I need to. Oh, well, there is an update. Let's see. An update here to Media Freeze's diary over at Daily Kos. She has this one here. Breaking. Another witness, Patrick J., whatever his name is, refuses to testify under oath. Oh, my God. And as you know, that's going to be the charge leveled against Dr. Ford, so we might as well level it against all these other people who likewise refused to testify under oath. What's the update? Now, yet another person has come forward who was not at the party but heard about it, as did many others at the time. Is this the... I think this is the one we were reading before. So I guess timeline-wise, they identify PJ here, and then later on, Christina King comes forward and says, I wasn't there at the party, but we talked about this at school. It's an important contemporaneous account and very interesting, and I'm sure will be ignored by Republicans as far as they are able to avoid it. Let's round up some questions and comments that have come in along the way. Let's see. Let's see. Matthew Rigdon going back to the lottery comments. If you're going to play the lottery, pick one set of numbers and play them every time. You'll marginally increase your odds. I've heard it said, and I can see how you possibly could, and certainly no better than taking various stabs in the dark, but only moderately better. If you like playing, go ahead. Do it any way you like. What else have we got here? This is a good suggestion. The Mighty OCD suggesting that Dr. Ford go on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Or does Oprah still do a show? I think that would be good too, right? Never mind the Judiciary Committee. That's not how he says it. He says it in much more colorful terms, what you should do to the Judiciary Committee. But he's absolutely right. There's no reason you couldn't just do it there. Although then, of course, they say, well, now you're just seeking fame and blah, blah, blah. And, okay, that's hilarious because it's fleeting fame and an interview on the Ellen DeGeneres show is certainly worth trading for death threats, right? But why would anybody want to, hash that out in any way that makes any real sense? All right, let's see. Do I want to... let me open this one up here just to have as a talking point for later. I have a few things flying. I should keep Twitter, the main news feed column closed so I don't get distracted here. Let's see. What else have we got here? Let's not forget, Matthew Rigdon says that Kavanaugh was probably the only candidate who said he would outright cover Trump in the Russia investigation, no matter the evidence or circumstances. He may very well have been, and I'm certain that they would rather have him than anybody else. One other reminder from the Mighty OCD. What about the process rant you forgot about Tuesday? I forgot about all the process rants. There's about 19 of them I forgot. But yes, it's true. Did I say I wanted to do this whole rant over again or just remind everybody of previous rants? I refer the honorable gentleman to the rant I gave some days ago. And maybe that should be enough for you to go on. But we were talking about, or he's talking about, I wasn't because I forgot, the whole question we've asked before. How do we even know that Brett Kavanaugh has really been nominated? I just ask this sort of in the sense of, the process sense. What does it mean to be nominated for the Supreme Court? I mean, technically speaking, we understand what it means. Okay, someone has been nominated to this seat, and we all know what that's supposed to mean and how the media treats it and what happens, and they have hearings and they have votes, etc. But technically speaking, how do you get nominated? How does the Senate know that the person that they are going to interview, how do they know it's worth setting up meetings and hearings, etc., and they don't accidentally nominate the wrong person or confirm the wrong person to the Supreme Court, whatever? That's an interesting constitutional question, by the way. What if you just held hearings and confirmed somebody else and just said, bam, that person's on the Supreme Court? Like there's a real answer to it. But what if McConnell were to say, this dotard, he's never going to get it. He's insisting on nominating Kavanaugh. Let's interview somebody else and just say, let's just purport to confirm this other person to the Supreme Court and see what happens. Now, of course, the Constitution lays out that the president shall nominate and the Senate shall give their advice and consent and therefore confirm the nominee to the Supreme Court. So there would be something seriously lacking there. But what an interesting thing that would be if you could just, if the rest of the court were in agreement that that was the person they wanted on the court. I mean, I guess they could decide to take the case and rule and say, yep, that'll work. That's fine. And everything will be just dandy from here on. But technically speaking, what it takes, you know what? I'm not even 100% sure I know the process inside and out. But my guess is that this is something that is formally transmitted to the Congress in writing from the White House, essentially a document purporting to make the nomination. I am sure it can come in as a form as informal as a letter from the White House signed by the president that says to the Judiciary Committee or to the Senate, anyway, notifying them, and it can be that easy, to the President of the Senate. I hereby notify you, the Senate, of my nomination of Brett Kavanaugh of Maryland to the Supreme Court of the United States. Hope everything's going great over there. Maybe you guys want to come over for ice cream or go to Mar-a-Lago. Maybe we could play some golf. Sincerely, Donald Trump. And it could be, that's it. But again, you never know with this guy, whether he knows what's going on, is mentally capable of understanding what the letter that's been placed in front of him says. Normally, the president wouldn't sit down at a typewriter and type this thing out in a normal presidency, and he isn't going to do it either. But typically speaking, you give the president, whoever it may be, the benefit of the doubt. He's read this letter. He takes the position seriously enough that he wouldn't just sign whatever they put in front of him without at all reviewing the contents or having any knowledge. I mean, he could read it. It says, I nominated Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. Who's Brett Kavanaugh? That's a problem. That could be something you want to look into. And then, of course, how many times have they presented him with documents only to have him wander out of the room without signing it? Or how many times did we hear, well, only once or twice, about Rob Porter before leaving the White House on sexual assault charges and battery charges, that he had gotten so good at forging the president's signature. How interesting. What an interesting thing for a staff secretary to say. And of course, there's also, there's all sorts of instances of him forgetting to sign things. Things might have been stolen off of his desk to avoid allowing him to sign. Things might have been placed on his desk. Things might have been forged with his signature and placed in his outbox so it looked like something happened or that he actually signed something. In other words, this White House is unique among all of the rest. And it would be a mistake, given this guy's track record, to assume, as you do with other presidents, that documents that arrive, official documents that arrive with what is purported to be his signature, are in fact things that he has signed or understood at the time that he signed it or reviewed in any way. And I guess there's no legal requirement that he review it, but there might be. You could make the case that you have problems with legal documents that you can, if you challenge any legal document in any normal setting and say the person who signed this was not of sound mind, not mentally, didn't have the mental capacity to sign this document and make it binding, that's a case you're allowed to make. Now, nobody would entertain it probably against the President of the United States, because we have never entertained anything like that against the President of the United States. But this guy is different from all previous presidents. I think there ought to be a certain lack of trust as between this Congress, really, even though they're a Republican, and this president. There's a room designated at the Capitol for the president when he visits to sign documents. Really, actually, like, the original purpose of it, I guess, I mean, besides giving him a workspace, was so that members of Congress could witness the signature being affixed. I doubt very much whether the original intention was, well, the founders know very well that people are constantly forging documents as president, and it's important that we witness this thing because we otherwise think the president will constantly be lying about it. I don't think that's what they were thinking. They were just sort of thinking about the historic value of witnessing signatures of important bills, et cetera, not the evidentiary value of witnessing the signature of important bills. But that is out there. And look, it would be a huge pain in the ass if President Trump had to go to the Capitol building to personally sign every bill and let everybody see him signing every bill. Ordinarily, taking his word for it is what makes the system work. But there's no reason in the world to take his word for anything. And I think we got into this discussion on Tuesday because there was another example from over the weekend of basically garbage documents coming out of the White House. I'm going to try and dig up what that one was about. But I reiterate, Congress, if for no other reason than wasting time, should demand a roll call vote on everything that arrives from the White House that purports to be under his signature. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just a minute break, and that's all it took to dig this up. Yes, I am now reminded it was our friend Sponson, and I think I even put it that way when I did bring it up on, Monday, Tuesday, who tweeted, let's see, what was this? Yesterday was the 19th. Oh, yeah, on Monday. You have been right about this, which is a great way to start your tweets to me in the morning. You have been right about this. White House once again issues completely fake document. Let's see how fake it was. This was based off of the tweet of Chris Geidner, who over at BuzzFeed watches all things legalistic, etc. /political. This just in, he says, asked for the, this story. We didn't get to this one. Asked for the actual presidential directive or directives referenced in the White House declassification related statement. We didn't even get to this whole mass declassification of certain selective parts of the record with respect to the early stages of the Russia investigation. You'll likely have caught wind of this story anyway, even if we haven't summarized it here. But asked for the actual presidential directive or directives referenced in the White House declassification related statement. Remember, it was just done by statement. Here's a statement from the president. I hereby declassify that stuff. Press Secretary Sanders told BuzzFeed News, quote, there isn't anything else, just the statement. And that may give rise to some problems. There's been a lot of complaints about the propriety, it's really impropriety, of declassifying these things for the reasons he's declassifying them, the selectivity of the declassification. There's about 9 different levels on which this story is a horror show. But we can stick for the moment to the process part of it, which is that's apparently not how declassification actually works. Here is, this is just a clip, I guess, from Geidner's own piece here, giving some broader context, but really he said everything that needed to be said, I think, in the tweet. The White House announced on Monday that President Donald Trump had ordered the declassification of several documents related to the ongoing Russia investigation that involved people the president has criticized. Well, that's true. In the statement, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said Trump directed the declassification of some documents and public release of others, quote, at the request of a number of committees of Congress and for reasons of transparency. That's important again. Hold on a second. at the request of number of committees of Congress. Asked for the actual presidential directive or directives referenced in her statement, Sanders told BuzzFeed News there isn't anything else, just the statement. Now, I said that was going to be important again, and I didn't even realize it when I was reading this thing. But somewhere up top around here today, I know I put aside, there it is, Renato Mariotti's tweet about Matthew Gertz's tweet about this whole thing. We'll start with Renato because I think he sums it up nicely. Trump declassified sensitive materials. Remember what they just said, because the request of several congressional committees, right? Trump declassified sensitive materials because Fox News hosts Lou Dobbs, Sean Hannity, and Jeanine Pirro asked him to. The Telly told him to declassify. My dog told me to declassify these materials, is basically what we're saying here. Materials that he never bothered to read himself, by the way. Again, good reason to believe that he had no idea that he was signing the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh, or anyone else for that matter. Documents he never bothered to read for himself, and his own Justice Department said couldn't be released without jeopardizing ongoing investigations. Hence, complaining that, the Justice Department says it. Well, I hate the Justice Department because, what's his name? Sessions is there, and I have no Attorney General. Matthew Gertz's tweet dives a little further into this. This is a transcript of the Hill's Trump interview, which reveals that he says he called for declassifying the FISA application because he was, quote, asked by so many people that I respect, including, quote, the great Lou Dobbs, the great Sean Hannity, and the wonderful, great Jeanine Pirro. Great. Also. I mean, now that is his, verbal crutch, like Palin's. Also, we'll just say great in the beginning. Great, wonderful, also, Lou Dobbs. And it is accompanied with a Media Matters entry on the subject and some screen grabs of the Hill's transcript. And here are those screen grabs on the section about declassifying documents in the Russia probe. Buck Sexton, not even apparently a fake name. It's the real live, I guess, maybe, reporter for the Hill. Although, who knows? If Garance Frank Ruta is a fake name, then certainly so is Buck Sexton. Are you kidding me? What is Buck Sexton's porn name? I would like to know. Let's do one of those online quizzes. But don't, because then you'll have your information captured by Cambridge Analytica. Buck Sexton, I'm just going to say it again, asks him, have you reviewed the memos yourself? What do you expect them to show, if so? Great question. Normally not one that gets asked, but Dotard President, have you reviewed the memos yourself? Do you know why? Do you personally have knowledge of why you have declassified these things? And the answer is no, on both counts. I have not reviewed them. I have been asked by many people in Congress, as you know, to release them. I have watched commentators that I respect begging the President of the United States to release them. The fact that he said begging means it's a lie. Didn't happen. We're sitting with one right here. We're sitting with two. You're right. More than once. What does that mean? He's babbling. And I have had many people ask me to release them. Not that I didn't like the idea, but I wanted to wait. I wanted to see where it was all going. And I think this whole, it's a hoax. Greg Jarrett wrote a book called The Russian Hoax. It actually is a hoax. I call it a witch hunt, but it's a hoax beyond a witch hunt. Let's see, there's more. But it's been totally discredited. Even Democrats agree that it's been discredited. What? I don't know. They are not going to admit that, even though I just said that they do. But it's been totally discredited. And I think, frankly, more so by text than by documents. What? Oh, he's actually talking about the texts, the text messages. I think the texts, not only theirs, many others. So honestly, Buck, I have been asked by so many people that I respect, please, the great Lou Dobbs, the great Sean Hannity, the wonderful, great Jeanine Pirro. No, she takes it so personally, and that's not, let's say they like me. But this is beyond liking me. They know that this is one of the great scandals in the history of our country. Because basically what they did is they used Carter Page, who nobody even knew, who I feel very badly for. I think he's been treated very badly. They used Carter Page as a foil in order to surveil a candidate for the presidency of the United States. Not, by the way, that he understands what it means to be a candidate for the presidency versus, say, anything else. This, too, somewhere on my list of items that I wanted to bring up. Yes, here we are. The tweet I noticed was from David Jolly, believe it or not, who says, yeah, you're not going to believe this one. Also from the same interview, the Buck Sexton, and also John Solomon on this one. I guess those are the two who are sitting right there. Oh boy, is this going to be an AMP presentation? I think it is. Exclusive, Trump says exposing corrupt FBI probe would be the crowning achievement of his presidency. And it might be. Actually, that's not a bad call. But there's more to this transcript, and this is the part that David Jolly highlights for us. He says, Trump also said, this is in the article, Trump also said he regretted not firing former FBI Director James Comey immediately instead of waiting until May 2017, confirming an account his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, gave Hill.TV if you're looking for them on the internet, earlier in the day, that Trump was dismayed in 2016 by the way Comey handled the Hillary Clinton email case. No, he wasn't. And began he was. He wanted it more pressing, right? He originally said, I fired him because he was too hard on Hillary Clinton. You remember that story? That's gone away, I think. He was dismayed in 2016 by the way Comey handled the Hillary Clinton email case and began discussing firing him well before he became president. And that also is not actually very good for the obstruction case, by the way. And here's the quote that they get from him in the Hill interview. If I did one mistake with Comey, I should have fired him before I got here. I should have fired him the day I won the primaries, Trump said. And that's where David Jolly says, gasp, I can't believe it. Trump on Comey, I should have fired him the day I won the primaries. Yep, you read that right. Of course, those of you listening at home who are process fans know that once you win the primaries, you are merely a nominee for the office of President of the United States. Mitt Romney couldn't have fired the FBI director. Let's say, for that matter, John McCain could not have fired the FBI director. If you win the primaries, you're not president. But what the hell, right? If I should have fired him before I got here. I should have fired him the day I won the primaries, Trump said. I should have fired him right after the convention, in case you think he misspoke. I should have fired him right after the convention. Say, I don't want that guy. Or at least fired him the first day on the job, when you could have fired him. I would have been better off firing him or putting out a statement that I don't want him there when I get there. And that might have worked to some extent. But yeah, firing him as the nominee the day after the convention, no, I don't think so. I don't think that really would have worked out. Just another example, though, of the now mounting body of evidence that the president of the United States, who purports to be the president, and I don't know that he really is. I haven't seen the documents. But a guy is sitting there pretending to be president of the United States, does not know the difference between a primary and a general election. Remember the other day we found out in a portion of the Woodward book about his discussion with Steve Bannon and David Bossie, where they confront him about his voting record, and Bossie says, you hardly ever vote in primary elections. You've only voted in one in your entire life, and Trump goes crazy. That's a lie. It's a dirty, rotten, stinking lie. It's an effing lie. You take that back right now. He didn't say that part, but he called it an effing lie, and Bossie's like, dude, I have your records right here. First of all, I'm working for you. I'm your guy, and I'm telling you, I did the research. Here is the government record of how often you voted in primaries. It's a lie. I voted every time I got to vote. No. And when he hammers home to him, finally, primaries. Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, you're correct. It was an effing lie a second ago. Now, oh yeah, right, whatever. Anyway, something else, other thing, right? Again, immediately, you're a liar. No, actually, you're a liar. Before you even say anything, I want to establish, you're a liar. You lie about everything all the time. So here we are with this one. The guy just doesn't know. He doesn't know what a primary is. He doesn't understand our political system. He really shouldn't be there. Anyway, there's the declassification story, which has all of its many levels of, goddamn, he's an idiot. And I don't know how much do you want to dive into that story? I'm going to jump around because there's so much happening that needs mention, if not full discussion and full vetting. But man, that was really amazing. It's still incredible to me that no one has been able to, iron this out, let's say. Wow. Okay. I'm overwhelmed by the number of things we could go to here. Let's see. I'm going to skim down a little bit here. Let's see. There's more Kavanaugh. Is that the Kavanaugh angle I want to take right now? Yeah, we got some time for that one. It's middle of the segment here. Let's see. Let's go to the article Greg referenced earlier in the Washington Post. Oh, look, they're going to give me the AMP version of it. All right, I'll read it. The Fact Checker, this time by Salvador Rizzo. Does he say Rizzo or Rizzo? We'll see. Brett Kavanaugh's unlikely story about Democrats' stolen documents. Another very, very important angle on the Kavanaugh nomination, and another very good reason to, honestly, to threaten to be rid of him when and if Democrats ever regain control of Congress. I'm just going to take this moment to go to the actual Washington Post version of this thing and close out the AMP one so that I can be sure of what I'm reading here. I hate you, AMP. I guess they're probably not going to sponsor the show now. Brett Kavanaugh's unlikely story about Democrats' stolen documents. Let's see. First, it begins with an exchange, I guess, from the hearings. Senator Dick Durbin saying, I guess what it boils down to is this. Since you've worked up here for so long, you had to be able to spot things that were being said that looked revealing. When Manny Miranda has a revelation about questions that might be asked of a nominee or what the schedule is going to be under a Democratic chairman, did that ever come up? And did it ever raise a question in your mind that perhaps he knew just a little bit too much for a staffer on Capitol Hill? Kavanaugh's answer, I have thought about this, Senator. There was nothing out of the ordinary of what Senate staffs would tell us or what we would hear from our legislative affairs folks. That said, I cannot tell you whether something that he said at some point, directly or indirectly, derived from his knowledge that may have come from these documents. I just cannot speak to that at all. I can say, in direct response to your question, that no, I never suspected anything untoward. Had I suspected something untoward, I would have talked to Judge Gonzalez about it, who I know would have talked to Senator Hatch about it, but I never did suspect anything untoward. And I doubt the other parts of that story too, but okay. At least it's a story. I knew Mr. Miranda, as he and many other Senate staffers were part of regular meetings, telephone calls, and emails about the judicial confirmation process. These meetings, calls, and emails were typical of how judicial confirmations have been handled in past administrations. I never knew or suspected that he or others had obtained information from Democratic computer files. That actually, I guess, are we moving over now? Or is that's part of Kavanaugh's response to written questions from Senator Patrick Leahy. Is that right? Why is that in here? That doesn't seem to be, that's clearly identified as Durbin. Maybe this is another section, or I guess you're meant to, is that this, I can't even tell you what's going on here. Exchange at Kavanaugh's confirmation. That was the exchange at Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing for the Court of Appeals in the D.C. Circuit. That was from the 2004 confirmation hearings. that exchange between Durbin and Kavanaugh. I'm on the Washington Post's page here, and this is no more help than the AMP page. I guess the next thing here is video of the exchange between, or I guess part of Kavanaugh's response to written questions from Senator Pat Leahy in November 2004. And that was the part about, I knew Mr. Miranda, as he and many other Senate staffers, part of regular meetings, etc. I never knew or suspected that he or others had obtained information from Democratic computer files. Then, I guess there's more here from 2006. This is an exchange between Ted Kennedy and Kavanaugh. Kennedy asking, have you ever gone back, I don't think I can do his voice, now that you're aware of it, and seen what decisions you may or might not have taken on the basis of documents that were illegally taken? Kavanaugh answering there, Senator, there's a very important premise in your question that I think is incorrect, which is, I didn't know about the memos or see the memos that I think you're describing. So I think, Kennedy interrupts here, oh, you never saw any of those? No, Senator, that's correct. I'm not aware of the memos. I never saw such memos that I think you're referring to. I mean, I don't know what the universe of memos might be, but I do know that I never received any memos, and I was not aware of any such memos. So I just want to correct that premise that I think was in your question. Interesting. Sometimes he sees them, but it was normal. Sometimes he sees them, but it's not anything I knew was stolen. Sometimes I never saw them at all anyway, whether or not I knew they were stolen. Let's see, another exchange here, this one from this time around in 2018, Leahy asking, did any of this raise a red flag in your mind? Did not, Senator, because it all seemed consistent with the usual kinds of discussions that would happen. And sometimes people do say things of, here's what my boss is thinking, but don't share it around. I mean, I must have had so many conversations in the course of my life like that, where someone's saying like that about something. In other words, trying to give you a heads up on something, and that just seems standard Senate staff. All right, and now into the analysis. Did Kavanaugh know he was getting stolen information while he worked at the White House? This is one of the biggest questions Democrats have raised about Kavanaugh's credibility, and we set out to investigate. Manuel Miranda, a Republican Senate staffer who was quarterbacking the GOP's moves on judicial nominees, stole a trove of Internet documents from Democrats on the Judiciary Committee between 2001 and 2003, assisted by a clerk. Miranda shared some of those documents, or key details gleaned from them, with Kavanaugh and other GOP allies, working to secure Senate confirmation for some of President George W. Bush's polarizing judicial nominees. By the way, just to interject this, George W. Bush has weighed in on the Kavanaugh nomination and thinks he's a terrific guy. And that's not too much of a surprise. He's a George W. Bush guy, of course. And so you would have expected him to back him up. But just in case you were waiting to hear from the prep school drunken philandering crowd about what they think about prep school drunken philanderer Brett Kavanaugh and his crowd of people, you'll be pleased to know that the other Washington elite prep school drunks think he's an awesome guy. Don't forget who George W. Bush is. I mean, I know everybody thinks, oh yeah, George W. Bush, President of the United States. He's a former president. He's endorsing this guy. That's important. Well, he's speaking both as his former employer and a fellow Washington elite prep school drunk philanderer. So he's not really the greatest character witness in all of this, but we tend to forget these things and treat him as a former president anyway, even though in this context it's probably best to think of him the other way. Now back to the story. As strategic advantages go, Miranda had struck gold, gaining real-time access to the opposition's innermost thinking during a bitter partisan standoff over the composition of federal courts. The stolen documents covered the Democrats' tactics and plans in minute detail, and also their talking points, potential lines of inquiry for some nominees, eerily precise details about Democratic maneuvering inside caucus meetings, specific news articles Democrats were circulating among themselves as they researched nominees, and other juicy insider information. And that's just what's in the limited amount of records released from Kavanaugh's time at the White House. Kavanaugh has maintained since 2004 that he had no inkling that he was privy to stolen information. Our review of the records and testimony on this issue shows that Kavanaugh's repeated pleas of ignorance warrant heavy skepticism. That is to say, he's lying, but we can't say it yet. The facts. This is it. Are you ready for the facts? In 2001, Jason Lundell, I'm guessing at the pronunciation, a clerk in the Senate Nominations Unit, found a security lapse in the Judiciary Committee's network that gave wide access to any files stored in Democrats' or Republicans' folders, according to a March 2004 report by the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms. Miranda often told Lundell where to search and would sometimes tell him that there was something new in a particular folder and ask the clerk to print it for him, according to the report. Miranda admitted accessing the computer files of the Democratic staff himself on one or two occasions, the report added. A forensic analysis of Lundell's computer identified 4,670 files taken over 18 months from 2001 to 2003, most of which appeared to belong to Democratic staff. Lundell told investigators he, quote, frequently searched the folders of some Democratic staff on an almost daily basis while working on the nomination of Judge Priscilla Owen, Bush's pick for a seat on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Owen's nomination did not sit well with Democrats and became a sticking point. Miranda, now a lawyer in private practice in Maryland, did not respond to our request for comment. He previously told the Washington Post that he never told Kavanaugh he was sharing stolen information. And there's an update here. Miranda noted that he was not prosecuted for these events and sent us a law review article with his side of the story. How charming. I never told him that I got this from the Democrats, Miranda said. There was never anything like that. Regardless, did Kavanaugh have any reason of his own to suspect something wasn't quite right? Even if Miranda never told Kavanaugh precisely how he got the information itself was richly detailed and yielded a ton of clues. We put together a timeline of the intel Miranda was feeding in real time to Kavanaugh and other GOP allies in Washington. Some question marks in the documents released by the Senate that were meant to be apostrophes or quotation marks have been changed for clarity. Okay, so let's see here. First excerpt, I guess. A July 18, 2002 email from Miranda to Kavanaugh and Viet Din and Don Willett at the Justice Department. Brett, it looks like then Senator Joe Biden's staff is asking him not to attend the hearing. This does not bode well. It means that they will depend on paper since they have refused to meet with her. On a related note, the Nation article linking Owen to Rove is being distributed by the Leahy staff. The email subject line was highly confidential, although they misspelled it. It says highly confidential, T-A-I-L. Anyway, although it's possible that Democrats leaked Biden's tentative plan not to attend Owen's hearing, it's not clear why any Democrat would want to share this information with Republicans, as it could have made it seem as though Biden was running from a thorny issue. Still, it's possible this tidbit slipped past the gates. Notice how Miranda can pinpoint precisely which article Leahy's staff was distributing, though. A July 19, 2002 email chain initiated by Miranda to Kavanaugh, Willett, and Nathan Sales and Steve Cobley, I guess, at the Justice Department. Any answer to this below, and why the Leahy people are looking into it? Below, he added two questions, seemingly written by Leahy's staff. What is the connection between Owen and Texans for lawsuit reform, larger issue, and the Texas Civil Justice League, smaller? Is there, and misspelled here, is there any coincidence in her donors and theirs? Cobley wrote back that research would indicate, quote, many similarities in specific donors, unquote, and theorized that Leahy would ask Owen about her connection to the tort reform movement in Texas. Miranda replied, in part, intel suggests that Leahy will concentrate on all things money, which probably he could have guessed, but intel suggested, i.e. stuff I stole from the Democratic server. Again, Miranda seemed to know in specific detail what Leahy's staff was up to. It's possible he was hearing some of these details through the grapevine, but the questions he's relaying seem oddly specific. Notice also the reference to intel about Leahy's potential line of questioning for Owen. Same point we were making. When we come back, we'll comb through a couple more of these emails because I'm told this is an excellent compendium of them. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A couple people have brought to my attention the breaking news that there is a multiple victim shooting. No, I don't know whether it's still in progress, but certainly being reported as breaking news from just north of Baltimore. Not much known about it at the moment, but we may be once again under the cloud of a mass shooting. We'll have to wait and see what this one is about and whether it warrants larger reporting. But I guess you always want to keep at least one eye on those things. By the way, interesting development going on in my tweet earlier here before the show about President Trump's misunderstanding about primaries and general elections. I was retweeting David Jolly's tweet here about when Trump said I should have fired him the day I won the primaries. Remember, like a few days ago, when I was saying when we found out from the Woodward book that Trump has never understood the difference between primaries and the general election, let alone his inauguration. We have this response from somebody I never heard of, Michael Cooley, saying, hey, is that the same as Obama saying there's 57 states? I mean, we're all allowed to make mistakes, and if not, then none of us are. Other people, of course, jumping right in there and trying to have the argument with him, although I got to tell you, again, it's not the same because, well, as the others are pointing out here, well, one, you had the sense right away, and in fact, it is followed up with another comment from Obama that says, at some point, that came out funny, and that's not what I meant. However, there's no indication of that from Trump, for one thing, but for another, he goes on to reiterate it by saying, I should have fired him after I won the primaries. I should have fired him right after the convention. And again, the whole point of my tweet was, no, this is also the second such incident in which he displays zero understanding of the difference between primaries and general elections. Had Obama gone back and said, no, there really are 57 states, then we might have something here. But apparently we don't because, I don't know, Trump's very dumb, and I guess so are his supporters and defenders. So maybe I'll go back and answer that via Twitter at some point. Anyway, in the meantime, back for the moment to the Washington Post article. Now I have to flip through my 8,000 open tabs and try and find it. Where were we with this? Yes, the next one up was a July 28th, 2002 email being quoted here. An email chain initiated by Miranda to Kavanaugh, Sales, Cobley, and Willett. Quote, I would ask that no action be taken by any of your offices on this for now, except as I request. It is important that it be confidential to the recipients of this email and up your chains of authority only. Yeah, well, up your chain of authority, pal. But it doesn't really say that. That's my commentary. As I mentioned on Friday, Senator Leahy's staff has distributed a, quote, confidential, unquote, letter to Dem Counsel on Thursday from Colin Petty, P-E-D-D-I-E, who served as the attorney for Jane Doe in some or several of the Texas bypass cases. According to either the letter or the Leahy staff, Ms. Petty sent this letter in the strictest confidence because she is up for partner and believes she will be fired if it is publicized. Could there be any more indication that this was like not information they're supposed to have their hands on? Still, it doesn't say that it was stolen from a server. Several members of her firm are lead supporters in the Owen nomination. Leahy's staff is only sharing with Democratic counsels. However, we're not Democratic counsels. So again, problem. However, we might expect this letter to be used like the Brenda Polkey in Pickering at a moment when we are unable to respond. I have not seen the letter, but it strongly criticizes Owen's actions on the Doe cases, especially for her appalling insensitivity, that's a quote, to the pregnant minors before her court. Specifically, Petty accuses Owen of publishing dissents and concurrences in which paragraph after paragraph of confidential testimony was quoted in great detail. Later on in the same email, Petty criticized Owen's dissent in Jane Doe, for which argued that parental rights should trump the risk that parents would throw a minor girl out on the street upon finding out she was pregnant. This email, the commentary continues, is a big tell. Miranda was describing in detail the contents of a, quote, confidential letter that Leahy's office had received from an Owen critic, Colin Petty. Miranda, in this email, claimed not to have seen the letter itself, but that raises the questions. How could he go on to quote from the letter, seemingly verbatim? And how could he have summarized Petty's points with such precise detail? In the quote again, specifically, Petty accuses Owen of publishing dissents and concurrences in which paragraph after paragraph of confidential testimony was quoted in great detail. Miranda wrote, notice how he seems to be quoting directly from Petty's letter, and he does use quotes in there. Kavanaugh responded the same day with a detailed point-by-point counterargument. We can't imagine why Democrats would share this confidential information willingly with Republicans. It would be absurd to tip off Republicans about this secret weapon if Democrats were planning to use it, quote, at a moment when we are unable to respond, unquote, as Miranda wrote. But let's leave that aside for a second. Petty had requested confidentiality because she didn't want to endanger her chances of becoming partner at her law firm. Why would Democrats throw her to the wolves? Good question. A July 28, 2002 email chain, again initiated by Miranda to Kavanaugh and Willett, seeking an in-person meeting. Quote, I can provide useful info to map out Biden and Feinstein and others. Kavanaugh replies that he may have a conflict at the suggested time. I may have a conflict of interest. Oh, that's very noble of you to point that out. No, conflict at the suggested time. I can't make it. I have a thing. And later confirms he can't meet, but says, can the three of us get on the phone instead? I want to make sure I get this information, which was stolen. Willett says he can meet Miranda and receive whatever paper he has, and we can talk sometime today. Again, more commentary. It may be a coincidence that Miranda sought an in-person meeting to hand over what Willett described as paper on the same day he was emailing Kavanaugh, Willett, and others about Petty's confidential letter. In any case, notice how he offers useful info to map out Biden and Feinstein and others. A July 30th, 2002 email chain, Miranda to Kavanaugh, Willett, Din, and White House aide Heather Wingate. I have it on 100% info. Okay, everything in this is 100% information. I get it. I have it on 100% info, 100%, solid authority. What? That Leahy is trying to convene the Dems this afternoon after policy lunch to check on where they stand on Owen. He's seeking to place Owen on for this Thursday with the view that he would hold over. We would hold over. Hi, it's procedure. Don't worry about it. Feinstein and Feingold are not saying how they will vote, and this bothers them. The bad news is that they are not concerned about Biden. That bothers me. Suggested action: White House should intervene with Feingold and Feinstein as soon as possible. OLP might write Leahy, Office of, what is it, OLP? Legislative Yeah, I don't know what OLP is offhand. OLP might write Leahy and remind him that he promised Owen the ample opportunity to respond to questions. Kennedy's came out today. In either case, refer only to rumor, not to me, because then you'll get caught for stealing all those things. You see, Kavanaugh replied, "What about Cole?" Senator Cole. Miranda wrote, "They appear not to be worried about Cole." Once again, this richly detailed update might have been the product of fortuitous eavesdropping or an innate talent for buttonholing gossipy Democrats at the Senate water coolers. But by this point, a thoughtful White House lawyer might have begun to surmise that Miranda was getting too much insider information from Democrats too quickly. Also note Miranda's final line, "Refer only to rumor, not to me." August 13th, 2002, an email from Miranda to Kavanaugh and Willett. Two things about September 5th. My info is that it is a go, unless, according to the Leahy staff, there is a problem with the Dem vote count. This means that as of today, they are not certain about their count. Now, vote counts on sensitive political issues are not the sort of stuff that gets shared with the other party. Once again, this could have been filtered to Miranda in some innocent way, but we would have started to notice a pattern by this point. Now, January 13th, 2003, an email from Miranda to Kavanaugh appending the text of a letter about judicial nomination matters from Democratic senators on the Judiciary Committee to then Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle. Kavanaugh replied, "Who signed this?" Miranda wrote, "I am told that all the Dems on JC, Judiciary Committee." Kavanaugh may have noticed this letter landed in his inbox the day before it became public. Or maybe not. After all, no one asked the golden goose why its feathers were made of gold. Now a March 8th, 2003 email, a chain initiated by Miranda to Kavanaugh and others about Bush's nomination of Carolyn Kuehl to the Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. Dem JC, Judiciary Committee, Dem JC Counsel have all received copies of two news articles from 1982. He recapped the salient parts of the articles and added, Dems are trying to track down testimony and the related documents from that Finance Committee hearing. Kavanaugh responded later that day, Kuehl has dealt with this in her answers to Boxer and Feinstein's written questions that she did before she was even ever nominated. Note that she is Catholic, so any attempt to accuse her of pro-Bob Jones sympathy can be countered. This case and Roe are two big issues with her. Miranda then asked for these answers, and Kavanaugh replied in part, I will get them for you. More detailed insider information and counter-strategizing, of course. March 18, 2003, email from Miranda to Kavanaugh with the subject line, for use and not distribution, appending a long internal memo from Democrats fighting Bush's nomination of Miguel Estrada to the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. This is the closest thing to a smoking gun here. Democrats were marshaling their resources to block Estrada's nomination to the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. This memo, written by Leahy's counsel for nominations at the time, Lisa Graves, was basically the entire playbook on the most heated issue concerning Estrada, access to his records. Graves, who published an op-ed arguing that Kavanaugh lied, and a joint op-ed with others along the same lines, we read one of them, I think, had compiled all known precedents for releasing a nominee's records from the Office of the Solicitor General in the Justice Department. The White House was arguing that Estrada's records from that time were not subject to release because prior nominees who had done stints at the Solicitor General's office had not released them either. Democrats expected that the records would show Estrada taking far-right positions on Miranda, not this Miranda, Miranda versus Arizona, and on litigants' basic right to counsel, Graves recalled. She set out to find all known instances of such records being released and gathered the examples in a memo. Democrats never would have shared the memo, Graves said. It not only included all their best arguments, it also included their weakest ones, she said. It was written in case we had to hold the floor entirely, she said. It was our entire strategic defense. She added, Kavanaugh was certainly a hardcore political operative. He would have known exactly what this was. That this was secret research from the Democrats, from a Democratic lawyer on the most important fight they were having in the middle of that fight, on the most important issue that fight was about. We can't imagine any reason Democrats would give away the store like this to Miranda, or any reason Kavanaugh would just keep assuming everything was normal at this stage. Leahy's office sent us its own copy of the nearly 4,000-word memo, which is virtually identical to what Miranda sent Kavanaugh. April 9th, 2003, email from Miranda to Kavanaugh and a colleague. Brett, sorry for the slow reply to your message. Below is what I know prior to the yesterday's caucus. My understanding is that they are now trying to keep powder dry while they strong-arm those listed below. This suggests that we should file early for cloture rather than letting pressure build on them over recess. What do you think? The Democrat caucus has not yet decided whether they intend to filibuster Owen's confirmation, but will likely do so on Tuesday. Today, Senator Kennedy is seeking a meeting with leadership to convene a meeting of Democrat leadership with Judiciary Democrats to discuss a filibuster. Owen will be discussed by the Democrat caucus today. Senator Kennedy is expected to ask Democrats to keep their powder dry until leadership makes a decision. Yesterday, Senator Feinstein convened Democrat women on Owen. Last week, NARAL Pro-Choice America notified Democrat senators that it will score votes on Owen. According to Democrat sources, several Democrat senators have expressed concern about any filibuster of a judicial nominee that is based on substance as opposed to process. Really? How interesting. The senators that may be wavering or opposed to an extended debate are Lincoln, Pryor, Carper, Graham, Nelson of Florida, Nelson of Nebraska, Bayh, Landrieu, Breaux, Dorgan, Conrad, Baucus, Hollings, Byrd, and Miller. How telling. Kavanaugh forwarded the last paragraph to a colleague with the subject line, "From Manny on Frist's staff." Another impressively detailed compendium of insider information. April 10th, 2003, email from Miranda to a large group, including Kavanaugh. Please do not distribute this. On Monday, Senator Feinstein convened Democrat women on Owen, although she has told GOP senators she is troubled and against a filibuster. My info is that she attempted to see if they could be rallied. She discovered she could, but for Lincoln. On Tuesday, the Democrat leadership, together with Cantwell and Kennedy, tried to rally their caucus but left without a decision. Kennedy is asking Democrats to keep their powder dry until leadership makes a decision. Their hope is that pressure can be brought on the hesitant Democrats over break. He then listed the same Democratic senators he mentioned to Kavanaugh in the email the day before. By this point, it might have been clear something highly unusual was happening. I served in the Senate for 44 years, including 20 years as the top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, Leahy wrote in a Washington Post op-ed this year on September 13th. It has never been normal to obtain sensitive inside information from the opposing party, conveyed in secret and in real time, involving the most contentious issues before our committee. A smart political operative on the front lines of these battles would have seen these glaring red lights for what they were, clear evidence of nefarious acts. The White House did not respond to our request for comment, and guess what? Now they sum it up with the Pinocchio test, the fantastic Pinocchio test. All right, well, let's see what they have to say. Kavanaugh, since 2004, has faced dozens of questions from senators of both parties about this issue and has given essentially the same answer. Nothing seemed fishy because Senate staffers often shared this kind of information across party lines. Questions arose once again at Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing for the Supreme Court this month, and once again he gave the same see no evil answer. Even in hindsight, years after the document breach was revealed, Kavanaugh has maintained that nothing raised red flags and that he never received documents that appeared to be stolen or obtained in an untoward manner. These claims defy logic. An elite Republican lawyer who was immersed at the time in Washington's inside baseball, Kavanaugh strains credulity by claiming this extraordinary window he had into Democrats' thinking seemed above board. He received a steady stream of insider information over 9 months from Miranda, according to the documents available. It reminds us of Sergeant Schultz in the 1960s TV show Hogan's Heroes. I see nothing, I hear nothing, I know nothing. Particularly questionable are Kavanaugh's claims about the Petty letter. Miranda seemed to quote directly from materials Democrats had received confidentially, and about the Graves memo, which went on in breathtaking detail about Democratic strategy for a big, contentious political battle that year. The best case scenario is that Kavanaugh, who is up for a seat on the nation's highest court, has a glaring lack of curiosity or a superficial level of discernment. The worst case scenario is that he has been feigning ignorance since his first confirmation hearing in the Senate in April 2004, which was held after the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms had released his report documenting Miranda's serial theft. In any case, Kavanaugh's response to Leahy this month, describing all this as the usual kinds of discussions that would happen, is not accurate. Neither was his answer to written questions in 2004. These meetings, calls, and emails were typical of how judicial confirmations have been handled in past administrations. Neither was his response to Durbin at the 2004 hearing, where he said there was nothing out of the ordinary of what Senate staffs would tell us or what we would hear from our legislative affairs folks. All three statements. Merit, drumroll, we don't have one, 3 Pinocchios. Only 3? I guess so. Well, that's anticlimactic to get to 3 Pinocchios. Anyway, I just thought I would share exactly what sort of information it was that Brett Kavanaugh was reading and let you decide for yourself whether you really thought that should have tipped him off that the information was stolen. I would think the argument's a good one, but like Greg has said, it's very hard to get people to acknowledge the truth of things when their job depends on denying it, and that's the case here. Anyway, a good compendium and just a great opportunity to comb through what those documents say and why it is that so many Democrats are insisting that it really couldn't be any other way, but that Kavanaugh should have known that this information was coming from stolen documents, and it certainly should have been cleared to him by the time he gave his first testimony in 2004, because by that point, Miranda had already been fired, and the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms had already concluded that they were stealing that information. That was a known story, and that's why he was being asked about it. Really, actually, the answers in 2004 are probably more damning than the ones they give today, although the ones he gave today are closer to an open and shut case that he perjured himself the first time than anything else. All right, let's see where to go with this other stuff. There was the, here's another sort of information point that we can throw into this, and still about Kavanaugh. Huffington Post has this. Take it for what it's worth. Brett Kavanaugh liked female clerks who looked a, quote, certain way, Yale student was told. Yale professor and Tiger mom, Amy Chua, who's a Kavanaugh cheerleader, told the young woman to look, quote, outgoing. That is interesting, isn't it? And here is, it's illustrated with a photo of Kavanaugh getting a note passed to him, I guess, by that former clerk and woman who now works in the White House and may or may not have been flashing the white power symbol behind him, Zena Bash. She's handing him a note, and I wonder whether she looks that certain way, and that's why they chose her to illustrate this story. Let's see. A few years ago, who's reporting here? Emily Peck. Reporting a few years ago, as she was prepping to interview for a judicial clerkship, a student at Yale Law School received a troubling combination of warning and advice from her professors about one federal judge in particular. Brett Kavanaugh, she was told, liked his female clerks to have a, quote, certain look. Pinned down, I think, might be that look. Right now, Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court hangs in the balance as he faces an accusation that he sexually assaulted a girl in high school. That's a breezy way of putting it, but that's not what the story is about. The professors proffering the advice are themselves well known. Both Jed Rubenfeld and his wife, Amy Chua, the author of the controversial 2011 book, The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, I remember that whole wave of stuff, told this woman about Kavanaugh's preferences. Then, Kavanaugh was simply known as a prestigious judge on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, though neither said the judge did anything untoward regarding the women he worked with. Whew. Small favors. The student found their counsel off-putting. as anyone would, I think. I had mixed feelings, said the woman, who asked to remain anonymous due to privacy concerns. On the one hand, it's a yellow flag. On the other hand, it's a red flag. But okay, fine. On the one hand, it's a yellow flag. On the other hand, phew, I hadn't heard anything else. Okay, I guess so. It only went to yellow, I guess is what she's saying. That's the good news. Her first inkling that there might be issues with Kavanaugh came from Rubenfeld in a conversation about various judges with whom she might work. Rubenfeld took care to warn her about 2 judges in particular. Interesting. Check it out. First, Alex Kaczynski, then a judge on the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, also known to sexually harass his clerks, he told her. Kaczynski retired in December amid accusations of this harassment. The other was Kavanaugh. 2 judges, by the way, 2 judges this particular Yale law professor picks out of the entire federal judiciary as judges to watch out for. One who resigned in disgrace after it was revealed that he was sexually harassing his clerks, and the other is Brett Kavanaugh. I'll just leave that there for you to examine for yourself. The other was Kavanaugh, though the judge was known to hire female clerks who had a, quote, certain look, Rubenfeld told her. He emphasized that he had heard nothing else untoward. He did not say what the certain look was, and I did not ask, the woman said. It was very clear to me that he was talking about physical appearance because it was phrased as a warning and because it came after the warning about Judge Kaczynski. Good eye for context. The woman said that she had already heard rumors about Kaczynski and had ruled out a clerkship with him. By the way, this is a fantastic story, a fantastic glimpse into what it is to graduate from Yale Law School. Like I'm ruling out clerkships with various circuit court judges. I can take my pick. It's rarefied air, I'll say that. While she saw the warning about Kaczynski as a flashing red signal, the advice on Kavanaugh didn't stop her from deciding to interview with him. After all, it was only a yellow signal, right? That's when Rubenfeld's wife stepped in. At Yale, Chua is less known as the Tiger Mom and more sought after for her ability to help students land prestigious clerkships with federal judges. Another sort of factory item that they have at the Yale Law School that they don't have everywhere. We have no designated person to help you pick and choose which federal judge on the circuit courts you're going to clerk with, but you go Ivy for that. Anyway, these are, of course, the sort that can ultimately land a student the ultimate prize, a spot clerking for a Supreme Court justice. Indeed, Kavanaugh was once a clerk for Kaczynski before nabbing a spot as Justice Anthony Kennedy's clerk on the Supreme Court. Kavanaugh has denied knowing about Kaczynski's reputation with women. To the female law student, Chua echoed Rubenfeld's comments. And by the way, this is then illustrated in Huffington Post with a photo of Amy Chua, who I think the idea was, although they don't look similar because Chua is Asian and Zena Bash is not, but by golly, they do look awfully similar in interesting ways, and I guess that's what the unwritten text of the Huffington Post piece is about here. She advised me to be and dress outgoing, the former Yale student said. She strongly urged me to send her pictures of what I was thinking of wearing so she could evaluate. I did not. Interesting there, too, that Chua is like, well, here's a warning. He likes a certain look. Now let me help you get that look? I don't think that's really helpful. At the time, the student said she didn't know if this sartorial advice was about her own look, Kavanaugh's preferences, or Chua's ideas about what Kavanaugh liked. A friend suggested that the student needed the advice because she was awkward, according to a transcript of a G-chat conversation that the Yale student had at the time, and that was viewed by Huffington Post. The woman said she was not sure if Chua was giving this advice to others. She did, however, say that she offers members of her small group the opportunity to send her photos so she can help them figure out what to wear for interviews. I don't like this a whole lot, but maybe it's totally legit. You know, women get judged on dumb things, and she's aware of this, and look, if it helps you get a job, but, oh God, and then at least no one had ever heard anything about Kavanaugh's chambers being difficult or dangerous places for women to work. That's That's something. I'll let you read the rest of this thing on your own because I'm not going to get a chance to do it, but it's a very interesting data point in all of this. Time now for some more data points from Justice Putnam on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and let me see what we can get in here both before and after the announcement. So let's see. The third person in the room sounds an awful lot like a men's rights activist. Yes, I was thinking the same thing. Good call there. That would be Mark Judge, not Mike Judge, the funny guy, but Mark Judge, the jackass. On the rest of the menu, a Colorado Democratic candidate for the state Senate was shot at while sitting in her truck, and she says she's been getting harassed for months. We'll have to look into that in more detail, but you'll have to depend on justice to do it for you. Next, after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Here's some more great good stuff from the Trump era. A black Wisconsin candidate for state representative was reported as a suspected drug buyer while she campaigned in a white neighborhood. Hey, you don't belong here. And the Florida GOP is horrified to learn that women curse. There's much more, of course, coming up next. You'll depend on justice to give it to you next. I'll see you tomorrow.